the Rotorua lakefront in the first minutes of the year 2002. So far, the lakefront Mardi Gras has been a relaxed evening of entertainment and family fun. But not far away on Pukeroa Hill, relaxation is far from the mind of one Rotorua resident. At Rotorua Hospital, Mrs. Joanne Napier has already been in labour for 16 hours, and in the opening moments of the new year, she still has the best part of another 3 hours' work ahead of her before producing a son. In a well-established tradition, the Rotorua Daily Post is again able to report on not only another trouble-free New Year's Eve, but also gives front-page space to the story of the city's newest edition. After the tumultuous events of 2001, there'd be few in Rotorua who are not pleased to be able to start a fresh page with a new year. Since September 11 last year, there have been those predicting dire consequences for the New Zealand tourism industry. But as Rotorua basks in the golden days of the peak holiday season, the town seems as busy as ever. Most of those from overseas booking summer cruises around New Zealand's coast would have done so well in advance, and Tauranga reports the usual procession of visiting cruise liners. On one day alone, more than 4,700 passengers arrive at the port. Many of them visit Rotorua, providing a $2.2 million windfall for the city. There are other reasons for the buoyant times. New Zealand seems to be on a roll. In 2002, the national economy is predicted to grow by more than 3%. World petroleum prices are steady at around $20 a barrel, providing a pump price around the $1.04 mark. And then there's the weather. After a particularly soggy December, conditions are clear and hot. Brian Holden reports that the average temperatures are 2 to 4 degrees above the usual. New Year 2002 has proved a very busy time for Rotorua's retailers, but the Daily Post reports some dissension in their ranks. One of the earliest and larger anchor tenants of the Central Mall development, the Warehouse, has particularly made its presence felt this year. What with post-Christmas holiday sales and expanded opening hours, other retailers in the CBD are being forced to compete, and some would rather be having time off to enjoy the summer break. To Jay Bocock, president of the Rotorua Chamber of Commerce, that's an attitude that reflects some local social and demographic changes that have been accelerating since he took over the role in the late 1990s.
There's a whole group that now are probably in their early 60s that started putting their primary residences either on the very fringes of Rotorua or over in the Mount. And that was quite a large amount of the independent business owners. And what no one really thought about is when they move, so their spending moves. And a place like Rotorua really does rely on those people. We're a small business country, whereas we are, in terms of actual money across the till, a small business town.
Still in the first week of January, this Rotorua youngster makes the news as Daily Post sports writer Craig Tiriana describes how Jay Ann has just made New Zealand golfing history. At 13 years of age, he's become the youngest male ever to qualify for a National Golf Open. And an obvious talent is confirmed when only a missed 3-foot putt prevents him from tying with visiting golfing superstar Tiger Woods.
That point probably public notice that there was Korean golfers in the region who had started to come to Boys High through the success of their golf teams. And these guys were slowly starting to work their way into the regional teams and so forth. And Jay at that point was the pick of the bunch. Supremely talented, young. I mean, people still questioned how young he was because it seemed like he was a young boy for a long time because he was so much in the news.
The summer high season has seen Rotorua's airport busier than usual, and once again, front page news. 4 months after new anti-terrorism security measures have been put in place, the makeshift nature of these originally hurried arrangements are starting to cause frequent complaints. It's claimed that the hodgepodge of temporary parking barriers, crudely hand-lettered warning signs, and even a tarpaulin providing desperately needed shading are spoiling the aesthetics of one of Rotorua's main visitor entry points. Complainants are calling the airport a tatty-looking shambles, and are calling for matters to be remedied quickly. A Daily Post editorial reckons the airport is a disgrace. However, at the Rotorua Review, they take a slightly different slant. Editor Phil Campbell questions just how long anyone spends at the airport anyway, either coming or going, and implies the problem is just a storm in a teacup. At the Rotorua District Council, District Manager Ted Hansen's retirement day looms closer. But already there is strong interest from applicants for this influential position, including some from overseas.
It is part of the job, but it is daunting. It is, honestly. When you work with somebody for such a long period of time, 15 years, with Ted, his expertise with finance, with figures, was I guess, held us in incredibly good stead as we moved through the issues that we had to deal with. And when you lose somebody like that, you know that has really great strengths. And he was always very fair. He's fair-minded. Like, I think he always used to listen to the councillors. I don't know whether he agreed with them or didn't agree with them, but he always gave them a fair hearing.
I didn't want Ted to go. I actually put a motion on the floor asking him to extend, to give us more time within council, because it was quite a shock to me. Why I didn't want Ted to go at that particular time, we had some probably major issues coming up in council, sewage, just to mention one. Ted had the ability to keep us together, probably more so than the actual councillors or the mayor.
Mid-January, and this headline acknowledges the trend growing over the past 2 years. Educating foreign students is now a burgeoning and lucrative business. Wairiki Institute of Technology is doing well in what is becoming a competitive market. Riding this wave of growth, Te Wānanga o Aotearoa has built its success on attracting young Māori to tertiary education. With nationwide student numbers approaching 16,000, the Wānanga is in expansion mode. Local educator Turi Ngātai wants to extend his Rotorua operation into Tauranga and is offering free courses, which is annoying Bay of Plenty Polytechnic, who see this expansion as a form of poaching onto their territory.
Tauranga for me is home. I am eternally blessed for being in Rotorua because that's my second home. While we were focused on growth, we needed to move to the places that were growing as well. And of course, I fell in love with the Wānanga and what it was doing for the Māori. And of course, a person like me is always going to see what the Wānanga offers us to Māori in Te Arawa and say, we need some of this at home. And the move to Tauranga was based on that. Then the article came in the paper and from the Bay of Plenty Polytech. You see, I didn't lose 1 ounce of sleep over that at all. Not one skerrit of sleep. Because what I knew was the people who I was accountable to, the Māori leaders there, they wanted Te Wānanga o Aotearoa for what it was going to give their people. And it was about not about who was providing, it was what they were providing. And Te Wānanga Aotearoa at that time was, and still is today, was providing programs focused on the need for those people at that time.
He was very well connected. He certainly was energised, built a good staff, built new campuses like the old Honda building. Very quickly, the Wānanga in Rotorua was bigger than the Polytechnic in Rotorua alone, very quickly. There were 7,000 or 8,000 plus students at the Wānanga alone. I don't think it's ever happened with an Indigenous people before.
10,000 years ago, when the level of Lake Rotorua was much higher, its outfall wasn't towards the coast, but to the south, to the Waikato River. Hemo Gorge is the legacy of that ancient water flow, and today the southwards flow is almost unceasing traffic. Back in 1999, Hemo Gorge seemed an obvious and logical location to erect a symbolic southern entranceway that reflected Rotorua's strong Maori cultural traditions. At the time, the idea provoked much district council debate and eventually stumbled against the objections of various ratepayer groups. But to the satisfaction of the scheme's original proposers, it was an idea that resisted being defeated.
That was simply, again, us thinking we have three major gateways into Rotorua. What statement are we saying to people when they come in?
The concept of a stylised palisaded entrance has withstood a range of resource consents and planning and design stages. Finally, near the end of January 2002, the Daily Post reports the start of work on the roadside palisades and carvings which, when completed, will frame the lake and the city, a visual statement for those arriving to Rotorua from the south.
To be perfectly honest, the southern entry, which is where the palisading went up, wasn't my preferred, and it wasn't many preferred. Our preferred, clearly and obviously, was the northern entrance from Auckland, which is where our key market was. But that got so messed up in transit issues and everything else, and the one that they said, look, if you want it within the next 12 to 18 months, it's that one. And we end up going to the south, and yep, it's a great entrance, and it does what it needs to do, but at the end of the day, it would have been nice to have done the three and maybe make more of a statement.
But in 2002, exactly what sort of place are these arrivals coming to? With the beginning of another year, the Rotorua District Council is having to come to grips with new legislation affecting how local body government operates, requiring far greater attention to future planning in much more detail.
They created a huge amount of work, and it was all paperwork. It wasn't about achieving for the ratepayer. It was about doing all this consultation. And the trouble with the new system is you hooey people to death. You really do. You consult and consult and consult. And a lot of people say, look, we elect you, we expect you to do the job, get on and do the job you said you were going to do.
Amongst all this fresh paperwork, the District Council is in the throes of completing something called a Social Indicators Report, which contains some thought-provoking implications for the future of the city. In the Daily Post's view, the report indicates that Rotorua is a city with a serious socio-economic divide, and this headline poses an almost plaintive question. What happened to our middle class? During the last decades of the 20th century, Rotorua has not enjoyed the same levels of growth enjoyed by some other parts of the country. In Rotorua, the population at 64,500 has remained virtually static for the past 5 years, and now the figures indicate a very slight decline. But the trend is not something that is new.
Rotorua has never been a wealthy town. I think that so many people moved out of town. Most of the people with jobs here have always been, it's either the three main factors, of course, yet again, tourism, forestry and farming. We still have the farming, we still have the forestry, farming to a lesser degree, the changing face of farming. But it's tourism of those three that has remained the money spinner.
But there are those who maintain that an economy based on tourism has its own problems. Yes, providing jobs for unskilled people, but also contributing to Rotorua's significant income equality figures, because the average tourism job pays less than the average wage. However, in 2002, what a healthy tourism sector does provide is good levels of employment, the lack of which still haunts the mayor.
I didn't like to see what happened to our city back in the 90s, early 90s. I thought it was a tragedy really, because when you've got idle hands, our crime went up, and you've got families that couldn't earn any money and because there were just no jobs, and most people want to work. And so yes, I have always had this concern about unemployment, because I've seen the results of it and I've seen the effect on families, and it's normally was the lower socioeconomic families that get banged the hardest, and they really get hit.
The RDC's social report dovetails neatly with a district health survey released the month previously, which has painted a grim picture of a population suffering numerous health issues well above the national average, especially among the economically deprived. The existence of the problems is reinforced by this headline: the growing incidence of potentially fatal diseases like meningitis. In 2000 there were 10 reported cases in the Health Board's district. Last year it was 26. These are concerning numbers for the new chairman of the Lakes District Health Board, coming as they do at a time when the Rotorua Hospital is battling the pressures of chronic underfunding with its attendant shortages of staff and resources. Despite all this, the chairman, Stuart Edward, remains upbeat.
I coined the phrase later of being relentlessly optimistic, and I continue to believe that that was the only way to deal with things, because in the public sector there are going to be ups and downs, and I figure that for our community, my job is the opportunity I had in leadership roles to be an articulate advocate for our community.
He also begins the task of trying to staunch the constant flow of bad news that has been a feature of the local media for so long.
I went and talked to the reporter and just said, I need your understanding of what we're about and what we're going to do, and that was the beginning of a change in terms of how the Daily Post, the media, saw what we were doing. And again, that was a relationship development, and it was communication.
It was a dreadful black spot. Businesses in the area would all say that they'd just literally sit there and hear bang, ding, virtually every day.
Jill Nicholas is talking about the most accident-prone intersection in Rotorua, and often one of the busiest, the junction of Arawa and Tūtanakai streets. Since 1997, there have been 34 collisions recorded here, and now during January, the District Council has decided to do something about it. Overnight, road construction barriers appear along the Arawa Street centre line, preventing traffic crossing the intersection towards the lake.
It was just one of those bright ideas. There was mooted that they have a roundabout. The price, I seem to recall, was something like 20,000, and someone came up and said, oh, we can do this much better, we'll just put up a few barriers.
It may be just a trial, but to block off a well-established throughway without warning is an invitation to trouble. It comes in the form of an outcry from shop proprietors who claim to be losing trade, and label the barrier Rotorua's Berlin Wall. Others complain that the traditional Tutanekai Street view to the lakefront has been ruined by a new vista of white and orange. Almost certainly, this will not be the end of the matter. At the end of January, both local papers carry an obituary for one of Rotorua's leading citizens. Harold Holmes, OBE, CBE, has died at the age of 86. He has spent more than half his life as a Rotorua resident, starting as a boarding house proprietor in the 1940s and going on to become an industrialist, philanthropist and unceasing advocate for his adopted town.
He was a linchpin in Keep Rotorua Beautiful, and what a dynamo. Wasn't influential so much. He wasn't an advocate so much for the industrial side of town. His was very much that Keep Rotorua Beautiful.
By 2002, Holmes Packaging, the business Harry Holmes established on Tenai Road, has been acquired by international interests. But Mayor Hall suggests a real monument to his memory might be found nearer the lakefront.
I guess he was the guy that had the idea about the volcanic playground at the lakefront, and he worked incredibly hard in that area. So Harold, good friend, but also a great worker for the city and very passionate about making sure that he made his contribution to the place he lived, worked and played.
So far this holiday season, tourist crime has not featured in the headlines. Now in February comes this story. Overseas visitors staying at the Redwood Holiday Park suffer a car park break-in, losing cash and valuables. The promise of a special crackdown on thieves comes at a time when the police themselves are under some scrutiny. The Daily Post has already revealed the contents of a secret survey that suggests mass closures of police stations, including 7 in the Bay of Plenty. In some quarters, Rotorua's own station has been described as dysfunctional, overcrowded and inadequate. But the main concern is how the climate of closures might affect Rotorua's suburban community policing operations. Until now, things have been quiet on the lake pollution front. But with the holiday season almost over, the perennial trouble spot of Okawa Bay is back in the news. Residents are demanding better warning signs for the area to cater for out-of-town visitors and make them aware of the dodgy water quality of the area. As work continues over summer, completing the unsealed section of the Tauranga Direct Road, some minds are turning to the possible effects of the improved road link, especially on the village of Nongataha. At the District Council, there is spirited debate over what a 50 to 90% increase in the traffic flow might mean to the character of the northern side of the district. On the other hand, the rumour that Transit New Zealand may designate the new direct road as a national highway, thus saving local annual maintenance costs many thousands of dollars, has the sound of sweet music to council ears. And at the end of February, there is sweet music for all to enjoy. Dame Malvina Major and Sir Howard Morrison are the headline stars of the show as Lakeside 2002 eclipses its previous high standards, crowning an outstanding Rotorua summer festival of music that has lasted for months.